Hello, YouTube family. This is Alex here from Banganta House German Shepherds. Merry Christmas to everybody watching this video, and Happy New Year and Happy Hanukkah. This is part 2 of our video series on the German Shepherd, the East German Shepherd. In part 1, we covered World War II, and if that kind of a video is not your cup of tea, I understand. But I felt obligated to describe the world that lost 60 million people as a result of Hitler's ambitions to capture the entire world as we know it. And without understanding the historical context, it is very hard to understand what created East Germany and therefore the East German Shepherd in East Germany. So some of you may not watch that video, but I hope you watch this video because this video is dog content on a dog channel. To understand the East German Shepherd, you have to understand the political context in which this breed was formed. The border was tense. East Germany existed on a permanent war footing. The Warsaw Pact countries, which were occupied by the Russian army, the Red Army, at the end of World War II, acted as buffer zones to NATO. And each of the satellite countries, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, East Germany, was on a war footing, and it felt like war could break out any moment. In fact, in the 1960s, in the Cuban Missile Crisis, we almost had war break out. So to understand the East German Shepherd, you must understand that these were dogs not bred for the pet market. They were not bred where pet market, private market conditions pushed what was bred or what wasn't bred. These dogs were instruments of the state, owned by the state and managed by the state. So the market selects for friendly dogs, family dogs. Not to say these dogs were not necessarily not friendly, but that was not the main criteria for the breeding program. The East German government, the communist government of East Germany, was looking for certain specific purposes for these dogs. First, they wanted to eliminate all incidents of hip dysplasia. They wanted very sound, very strong, and very healthy animals which could work long hours and patrol the border. And by 1961, the Berlin Wall went up, and so patrolling that wall was very critical in the function of that dog. Stopping somebody coming over that wall meant a life and death decision. It wasn't like you're going to another country with a tourist visa. If you're fleeing from communist East Germany to West Germany, you were putting your life at risk. And so dogs were used as less than deadly force to prevent somebody from crossing over from east to west. The Stasi police maintained these dogs. The Stasi police was the equivalent of the Soviet KGB. The East German police were called the Stasi police. There was a constant state of conflict, and the expectation of conflict and war drove the breeding decisions that were made. There was also isolation from Western influence. So this was not a hobby environment. This was a security environment, which led to the creation of this breed subtype. What was the purpose of these dogs for why were they bred? They were bred for patrol, which meant detection, deterrence, handler safety, environmental neutrality, and zero tolerance for weakness. Dogs with a strong civil drive or aggression were desired, not undesired, but under the control of a strong nervous system, not to produce fear biters. So dogs which were sharp and would bite on command were a desirable quality. This is very different from the pet market dogs that we were seeing in the United States at that time, and very different from the West German show lines we were seeing in the western half of West Germany. So weakness was not tolerated. Hip dysplasia was not tolerated. Physical appearance mattered less than nerve strength. And so the question is, what criteria was used to evaluate such animals for the breeding program? Well, one system, I'm going to pronounce it as best as I can. I'm not a native German speaker. I'm going to say it as best as I can pronounce it. The Wesenwertmessziffern system. I'm going to say that again. the Wesenwertmessziffern system was a numeric system that created a numerical score for behavioral evaluation and confirmation evaluation. And it was a very scientific system. Actually, I wish they would bring it back. It was a very good system that was used, not just the Korong system, which is a Kormeister, which is a breed ward, but there's an additional element that was developed. And I'm going to explain that later in the video how that system worked. I'm going to just refer to it as the evaluation system, not to mangle the German. For those of you who probably speak German, sorry for my pronunciation. It's a very hard word for me to pronounce. I'll just call it the evaluation system. So what do these lines represent? They were not sport lines. They were not used for branding. They were not used for marketing. They represent different premiums in that a policeman or a soldier could take a dog one day, work him 8 hours, 10 hours, and then another soldier or policeman could take that same dog and also work him. And the dog had to work reliably for long hours, regardless of the handler. In other words, the ability to do the mission mattered more than being bonded with the owner. Now, of course, I'm not saying every dog was not bonded with its owner, but these are generalizations, and these were actually accurate generalizations. The dog had to work under pressure, and the dog had to be trained to work with a certain degree of self-confidence that comes from being well-bred. There are a lot of videos on YouTube about the East German Shepherd. Does this breed subtype still exist today? I would argue for the most part it's marketing hype today. People say, well, we have East German Shepherds as a marketing gimmick. I would say there are very, very few preservation breeders who actually breed East German dogs, more as a phenotype than what was existing back then. So they do exist in very limited numbers today with preservation breeders, but you will find in today's time, 2025, that people who say they have DDR lines are mostly using it for marketing and not possibly to have DDR lines, because East Germany fell in 1989 and this is 2025. So will this line survive that many years without being mixed with anything else? I doubt it. So in today's time, I would argue that the pure East German type no longer exists. We have some phenotypical resemblance to the old DDR type in some lines, but to truly call it an East German dog without having East Germany as a country existing anymore, I think that's a very hard thing to achieve. Although there are legitimate people who have these lines, for the most part in today's time it's a marketing ploy. But that was not true, and we're going to discuss these lines as they existed during the time period in which they existed, which was for 45 years. I'm going to share a screen describing the various lines of the East German Shepherd from 1945 until 1989. They lasted a little bit longer than 1989. They lasted into the early 90s. But I want you to pay attention to the anatomical structure, and I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to describe the lines as they existed back then. Please bear with me as I switch screens. I hope everybody can see this screen. Let me see if you can see it better now. All right, I'm going to not present the entire slideshow. I'm going to present it slide by slide because it's effective enough for what I'm trying to accomplish. The first dog you see is Alf von, I'm looking up because my other monitor is over here, Alf von Norderfelsen, line 5A. This is the German Sieger of 1955. Now remember, the SV was divided, the Richtschulverhund was divided, so you had the East German registry and the West German registry. So the stud book was split. So the Sieger in East Germany was a different Sieger than in West Germany. So when I say Sieger, I do not mean universal Sieger. I mean the East German Sieger, just in case you're not clear on that, all right? So now, this was the East German Sieger, 1955, Schützen 3, uniform working type, temperament, good trainability. Descendants include Don von Rollenstach. Now, what was line 5A known for? It was known for structural soundness, endurance, and stability. Dogs from line 5A were valued for being physically durable, mentally steady, capable of working long shifts without being reactive, frantic, or handler dependent. These dogs were meant to hold ground, not seek excitement, reliable, predictable, highly trainable, and hard to stress out due to repetitive duty. So this was line 5A. The next dog we're going to see. Now, line 11 is an interesting line because a lot of these German dogs I will show you are under line 11, but there are different subtypes in line 11. You have line 11A, line 11B, and line 11C. So first, what does line 11 as a whole represent? It's an important functional cluster of DDR breeding. Rather than producing flashy or expressive dogs, line 11 emphasized nerve strength, environmental neutrality, and psychological endurance. These dogs were bred to function under constant pressure, noise, confinement, monotony, unpredictability without emotional escalation. So first we're going to cover line 11A within line 11 itself. The first dog you're going to see is from 1947. This is just 2 years after the war. And he still has an SZ number because he was born before the war. So he's still registered with the SV. Notice the registry is still the common registry, which was combined. The year is 1947, which means this dog was born before the war. So he is registered in the old registry, which was Germany is one country. Notice pay attention to the way it's registered. So this is VA1 select Schützen 3, and this is Rolf von Oschbucher Land. And he has a good temperament, good angulation, long back. He's a little bit disproportionately long, lighter bone structure. And descendants include Bernd von Leerberg, Puschkas, and Haus Himpel. The branch of this 11A were neither extreme nor sharp. They combine solid nerves with enough working drive to remain effective without becoming overly reactive or handler fixated. These dogs were especially suited for general service roles where consistency mattered more than intensity. We then go to line 11B. And here we see a dog named X vom Richtern. I hope I'm not mangling that. And the primary son that he bred was Cliff von Blichschleflech. And again, if I am mispronouncing it, here it is, Cliff v. Beschklech. This is a DDR registry, 33052, and he was born in 1966. Notice the construction of the body is more muscular, more square, and heavier boned with a bigger head. I don't know if you noticed that. They lean toward very strong defense drive and presence without sacrificing control. Line 11B were often described as serious dogs, not impulsive, not flashy, but clearly aware of their environment and their role within it. They were useful in deterrent roles where presence alone mattered and where escalation had to be controlled, not emotional. These dogs had high defense drive. Line 11B. Here we see DDR Sieger Cliff vom Blichfleck, and he's from line 11A continued. So I showed you 11B. This is a dog from line 11A. This is a sire born 1973. So this is a famous stud dog. We're going to go on. Line 11C. 11C, the head of the line, which started the line, is this dog here. Ali van Grenert. Dark pigment, strong expression, elegant conformation, high working drive, associated with Barry van Onderschofer, Oefer, and Drusen v. Valkwapen, and Gier v. Barutherland. And this is a dog from 1953. Notice it's its own registry, DDR ZL number, not a SV number. Notice that registration changed because it's a separate country from West Germany. So they had their own registration system. 11C represents genetic depth and adaptability. Rather than producing a narrow behavioral type, 11C provided a reservoir of working traits that could be shaped depending on need. These dogs reinforced robust genetics, allowing the DDR system to maintain consistency without bottlenecking the population. So let's say you had a dog with a little bit too much defense and you wanted to tone it down, you would cross it with a dog from line 11C. Or you had a dog with a little bit too much prey and too much nerve. You would tone it down by crossing with line 11C. This line was a stabilizer, not too hard one way or the other, prey or defense. This was a stabilizing line where nerves were key. So if you wanted to get good nerves, you would breed back to a line 11C. If you had a dog from one of the other lines, that was how this line was used. Line 11D. Here, this dog reminds you of Lord Grishdrick, and in fact, Lord is one of his sons. This is the founder of the line, Ingo van Rooijen, line 11D. Outstanding type, sound temperament, courage, hardness, and descendants include Herd v. Ritterberg, Jeff v. Fleming Sand, and the legendary Lord van Glisdrick. This is a clear-headed dog which was unflappable. They show confidence without excess, capable of engaging when required, but not seeking conflict. They were especially valued for their ability to transition cleanly between being neutral and action, depending on command. Notice the heavy bone set. Look, notice the wide head. Notice the short coupling of the loin compared to the forechest. Notice the distance of the body in terms of length with respect to the shoulder to. Notice this dog is short, relatively speaking, closely coupled. He would not have a far-reaching trot. He's built more like a quarter horse than a standard bred. He is short-coupled, not quite long enough, but very muscular, very thick, and very strong-tempered. That's 11D. So 11D continued. This dog would exhibit similar traits. This is a dog from 1978, Held van Ritterberg. This is DDR registry, and this is the number. Notice how thick the body is, how wide and masculine the head is. The head is very important in the German Shepherd. How the head is carried is very, very important. Notice the masculine head construction. He's a bicolor. So this dog radiates from Ingo van Rudingen, and Held van Ritterberg is the dog we see here. Jeff van Fleming Sand is one descendant as well. And we have dogs such as Flint van Steiglerhor, Birko van Volschhochel, and of course, Lord Gristic is another descendant. All these German names are hard to pronounce. They're going to be in the description because of the difficulty in pronouncing these German names. So I'm going to put the exact spelling in the description. So these dogs could transition between being neutral to being on guard very cleanly without any kind of confusion. Very clear-headed dogs. The next dog is line 11E. We're looking at Condor v. Mother Fachel Seeger. Very hard dog, very good guarding drive, dark pigmentation. Descendants include Ochli v. Rundek, Fels van Kemmelberg, and Zorro v. Lagerval. Now I want you to pay attention to his physical construction. Notice he's not an overly square dog. He has the proper length between shoulder and croup. Notice his shoulder construction, chest construction, head shape, and overall physique. This dog has presence. Very little compared to the show lines of that same time period. Line 11D were selected for consistency, service longevity, and mental resilience. They were dogs expected to perform reliably day after day, often with minimal handler input and without emotional volatility. You can think of line 11E as quiet professionals, not dramatic, not expressive, but extremely dependable under pressure. We're going to go to line 11D. Oh, wait, I went back a step. This is not a good picture because that's the only one I could find from such a long time ago. This is Golf v. Ritterberg and his brother, Grant v. Ritterberg. These are the dogs which founded 12A, solid working ability, decent structure, but on the smaller side. And that's what they were known for. They placed greater emphasis on drive, assertiveness, and engagement. A more lively dog. Of course, we have line 13A, which led to a lot of the Czech dogs. And we have the starter of that line, Alf v. Kornis. Less prolific in modern pedigrees, but still valued for DDR service stability. Line 13A primarily comes through descendants of Alf van Kornis. And this line contributes very good structural correctness, temperament balance, reinforcing the physical and mental durability necessary for long-term service work. Line 13A dogs help stabilize breeding outcomes, ensuring that function was preserved without sacrificing soundness. So if you wanted to add bone, you wanted to add depth of color, you wanted to add head size, and you wanted to add steadiness, you would cross with line 13A if your dog lacked anything. This line was used to steady some weakness in a specific dog outcome from another line. This was a steadying line in a sense. Now, these dogs were handler neutral. One of the defining features of the DDR dogs was handler neutrality. Unlike modern sport dogs that often bound intensely to a single handler, DDR dogs were bred that they could be aligned, assigned, reassigned, and deployed without loss of function. That meant no emotional dependency, no need for personal bonding rituals, no collapse in performance if a handler changed. The dog's loyalty was to the task and command, not to the individual person. This was not accidental. This was a requirement of state service. I'm going to stop sharing that screen. So, what can we say about the German Shepherd? It was a very strong dog, very well built, very heavy boned, big blocky heads, straight back, almost no hip dysplasia, good civil drive, not prey monsters like today's working lines. Now, some people will claim, well, the Czech lines had similar purposes as the DDR lines. Why are they not included, and aren't they sometimes intermixed? Yes, they were intermixed. Czech lines and DDR lines were intermixed. Yes, they both were satellites of the Soviet Union under the Iron Curtain with similar breeding programs. If somebody had to say, well, what's the difference between the Czech type and the DDR type? Think of the DDR type as holding the line, and think of the Czech type as the spear, tip of the spear. They're going to push aggressively forward. The DDR dog will hold the line, but not let you push him. In other words, forward aggression versus defensive aggression. A little bit different. Now, of course, it varies on a case-by-case basis, dog by dog. But if you had to make an analogy, that's where I would put it. Also, Czech dogs are smaller physically than the DDR dogs, and lighter, and more mixed with West German working lines than the DDR lines were. The DDR lines were not mixed with the West German lines whatsoever. So, this is a relic of the past. It's a very important relic of the past. And do we now have different breeding based on the country of origin? No. We had that where you could say, well, this is an East German type, and the physical type and the nerve strength or the aggressiveness and civil drive would be different between an East German type versus a West German type versus a Czech type. There were distinct differences in the country of origin. But today's breeding is focused on success in the sport of IGP. They were no longer on a war footing after the collapse of the Soviet Union the way we were at the end of World War II and throughout the 1960s. The Czech lines were not mixed with the East German types until the 1960s. So from 1945 until the mid-1960s, 20 years, the East German lines developed completely independently of the Czech Republic whatsoever, which had their own breeding program. So, not to confuse that, I'm just making an additional point. Do I breed East German types? No, I do not. Can you recreate an East German type today without having East Germany? You could phenotypically recreate the East German type by breeding dogs which exhibit East German phenotype without having East German blood. You could create that dog to resemble the East German dog. But would it be a true East German dog? Obviously not. But phenotypically, you could make a dog which looks like it. But will it act like it? Probably not. So I hope you found this video useful. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and I hope you come back to this channel and enjoy your holidays, folks. Take care and see you in the next one.